If you're sitting on the toilet right now, pushing, waiting, and wondering why nothing is happening, I want you to stop for a moment, because one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're constipated is doing exactly what feels natural, pushing harder. And after 50, that can actually make the situation more uncomfortable. There's a much better way to approach this. In this video, I'm going to show you what you can do when you need to have a bowel movement, but your body simply isn't cooperating. We'll go through several practical strategies you can use at home, including one simple technique that can sometimes help your body take advantage of its own natural bowel reflex. But there's something important I want you to understand first. If you constantly feel like you need to go but can't, if your stool feels stuck, if you sit on the toilet for 10, 15, even 20 minutes without properly emptying, the problem may not simply be that you need more fiber. And that's where many people over 50 get trapped. They eat more bran, they add another fiber supplement, they drink another glass of water, they sit on the toilet and push harder, and somehow they end up more bloated, more uncomfortable, and still unable to go. So stay with me, because before we get to the fastest strategies, I want to explain why constipation can behave this way in the first place. Once you understand what's actually slowing things down, the remedies I'm going to show you will make much more sense. And there is one particular mistake I want you to avoid, because depending on what's causing your constipation, doing more of it can make you feel significantly worse. Let's start with something surprisingly simple. Your colon is not just a storage container waiting for you to push everything out. It is a muscular organ. Throughout the day, your digestive tract creates coordinated waves of muscular contractions that help move its contents forward. This process is called peristalsis. Think of it like a slow-moving conveyor belt. Your digestive system is constantly moving material through your intestines, absorbing nutrients and water along the way, until eventually the remaining waste reaches the colon and rectum. When that system is working normally, you don't have to think very much about it. You eat, your digestive system processes the food, your colon gradually moves the waste forward. Eventually, your nervous system sends you a signal. You feel the urge, you go to the bathroom. It's simple. But after 50, several things can interfere with that process. You may move less during the day. You may drink less fluid than you used to. Your daily routine may change. You may take medications that can contribute to constipation. Your pelvic floor muscles may not coordinate properly when you try to have a bowel movement, or your stool may simply become harder and more difficult to pass. And sometimes several of these things happen at the same time. That's why I don't want you thinking of constipation as simply, I haven't gone today. That's too simplistic. You can have a bowel movement every single day and still be constipated. If you have to strain frequently, if your stool is hard or lumpy, if you feel like something is still left inside, if you repeatedly have the sensation that you need to go but very little comes out, those can all be signs that your bowel movements aren't passing as easily as they should. And this brings us to the first thing I want you to try. Not a supplement, not a giant dose of fiber, not sitting on the toilet for half an hour, and something much simpler. Change the conditions under which you're asking your body to have a bowel movement, because your body has a natural window when the colon tends to become more active. And one of the strongest opportunities is often after you wake up, and especially after you eat. It's called the gastrocolic reflex. When food enters your stomach, your digestive system receives signals that essentially say, more food is coming, let's make some room. That signal can increase contractions in the colon. This is one reason some people naturally feel the urge to use the bathroom after breakfast. But here's what happens in real life. You wake up, you grab your phone, you rush around, you drink coffee while getting dressed. You're already thinking about traffic, work, appointments, or everything you need to accomplish. Then you suddenly feel the urge, but you tell yourself, I don't have time right now. So you ignore it. You leave the house. The urge disappears. And later that day, you're sitting there wondering why your bowel isn't moving. If that sounds familiar, I want you to experiment with something very simple. tomorrow morning, don't immediately rush past that natural window. Give your digestive system a chance. Wake up, drink some water, move around gently for a few minutes, have breakfast if breakfast is part of your normal routine. Then, when you feel the urge, go. And here's where the second piece becomes extremely important: your toilet position. Most people sit on the toilet exactly the way they sit in a chair, feet flat on the floor, knees roughly level with the hips, back relatively upright, and then they lean forward and start pushing. But there's a simple adjustment that may make the mechanics of emptying easier. Place your feet on a small, stable footstool. You want your knees slightly higher than your hips, and then lean forward comfortably. Rest your forearms on your thighs. Let your abdomen relax and breathe normally. You are not trying to win a strength competition. You're trying to create a position in which your pelvic floor can relax while you allow your body to do the work. This is especially important because many people accidentally do the opposite. They feel stool isn't coming out, so they tighten everything. They hold their breath, they clench, they push harder, and now you're creating more pressure while simultaneously making it harder for the muscles that need to relax to actually relax. So the goal is not push harder. The goal is relax better. Take a slow breath in, then slowly breathe out. Let your belly soften. Give your body some time. And if nothing happens after several minutes, don't sit there endlessly forcing it. Get up, walk around. Try again later when your body gives you another signal, because spending 20 or 30 minutes repeatedly straining isn't a good constipation strategy. And there's another reason I want you to pay attention to this. Repeated hard straining can aggravate hemorrhoids and can make the whole bathroom experience stressful. Eventually, your brain starts associating the toilet with discomfort. You sit down expecting a struggle. You tense up before anything even happens, and that tension can become part of the problem. So let's break that cycle. Now, if you're watching this because you need relief right now, there's another simple thing you can try. Gentle movement, not an intense workout, not running, not lifting weights, just walking. If you're physically able to walk safely, get up and take a gentle walk around your home for several minutes. Movement can support normal intestinal motility, and for someone who has been sitting for hours, even a little movement can be a useful change. This is particularly helpful if your day consists of long periods in a chair. Think about what your digestive system experiences. You eat, you sit, you drive, you sit at work, you sit watching television, you go to bed, and then you wonder why your intestines seem sluggish. Your digestive tract is part of your body. Your body responds to movement. So don't underestimate something as simple as getting out of the chair. And there's a small habit I especially like after meals: a gentle walk for around 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be fast. It doesn't have to make you sweat. You're simply giving your body a reason to move. But now we're getting to a point where many people make a major mistake. They hear the word constipation and immediately think fiber. So they go from eating very little fiber to suddenly adding huge amounts. Bran cereal, fiber powder, multiple servings of beans, raw vegetables, chia seeds, flax, and then they wonder why their stomach looks like a balloon. Here's the thing: fiber can absolutely be helpful for constipation, but more fiber is not automatically better, especially when you increase it suddenly. Some types of fiber absorb water and increase stool bulk. That's useful when your digestive system can move that material forward. But if you dramatically increase fiber while you're already bloated, uncomfortable, dehydrated, or dealing with slow transit, you can sometimes end up feeling even more full and uncomfortable. So if you're currently constipated, don't think, I need to eat as much fiber as possible tonight. Think, I need to make my bowel movements easier and more consistent. Those aren't exactly the same thing. And this is where fluids matter. If you're increasing fiber, your body needs adequate fluid. Otherwise, you're essentially adding more material without giving the stool enough water to stay soft. That doesn't mean you should force enormous amounts of water. It means you should pay attention to your normal hydration and make sure you're not routinely going through the day barely drinking anything. And if your doctor has specifically told you to restrict fluids because of a medical condition, follow that medical advice rather than increasing fluids on your own. Now, let's talk about foods. If you're looking for gentle, food based options that can support regularity, foods such as kiwi, pears, prunes, oats, beans, lentils, vegetables, and ground flax can be useful parts of an overall diet. But don't throw everything into your diet at once. Start gradually, because the goal isn't to create the biggest possible bowel movement. The goal is to create a bowel movement that is soft enough to pass comfortably and regular enough that you aren't constantly thinking about your colon. And there's one food that deserves special attention here: prunes. Prunes aren't magic, but they contain fiber and naturally occurring sorbitol, a type of sugar alcohol that can draw water into the bowel and may help some people with constipation. For some people, a modest serving can be useful. For others, too much can cause gas or loose stools. So again, we're not looking for an extreme solution. We're looking for the smallest effective change. And that principle is going to become even more important in the next part. Because what if you've already tried fiber? What if you're drinking water? What if you're walking? What if you're sitting on the toilet with your feet elevated and you're still getting that incredibly frustrating feeling, I know I need to go, but nothing is coming out? That's when we need to stop thinking only about the stool itself, because sometimes the issue isn't simply what is inside your colon. It's what your muscles are doing when you try to empty it, and that is an entirely different problem. In the next part, I'll explain how your pelvic floor can actually contribute to the sensation of incomplete emptying, why some people feel like stool is sitting right at the exit but won't pass, and what you can do differently instead of repeatedly straining. And I'll also show you why the timing of your bathroom visit can matter much more than most people realize. So if you've been struggling with constipation after 50, don't skip that part, because the answer may not be another spoonful of fiber. It may be learning how to get your body's natural emptying mechanism working with you instead of against you. Now, here's where constipation gets much more interesting, because if you've already increased your fiber, you're drinking enough fluids, you've tried walking, and you're still sitting on the toilet thinking, I can feel it, but it just won't come out. The problem may not be that you need more stool. The problem may be that your body isn't coordinating the final part of the bowel movement properly. And this is something many people don't realize until someone finally explains it to them. Your colon pushes stool downward. Eventually, the stool reaches the rectum. At that point, your body is supposed to recognize it's time to empty. Your pelvic floor muscles then need to relax, while the abdominal muscles gently increase pressure. It's a coordinated process. Think of it like opening a door. The colon is pushing things toward the door. The rectum is signaling that something has arrived. But if the muscles around the exit don't relax at the right moment, you can end up with a frustrating situation where you feel the urge, you sit down, you push, and almost nothing happens. Then you stand up. A few minutes later, you feel like you need to go again. You return to the bathroom. You try again, and the cycle repeats. If you've experienced that, you're not imagining it, and you're not necessarily doing something wrong. Sometimes the problem is coordination. That's why I want you to remember one sentence. A bowel movement requires both pressure and relaxation. You need enough pressure to move the stool forward, but you also need the outlet to relax. And that is exactly why excessive straining can become counterproductive. When you hold your breath and push as hard as possible, you're increasing pressure throughout your abdomen. You may feel like you're working harder, but harder does not always mean more effective. In fact, if the pelvic floor is tightening at the same time, you're essentially pushing against a closed door. So here's what I want you to experiment with the next time you're on the toilet. Sit comfortably, put your feet on a stable stool. If that position is comfortable for you, bring your knees slightly above your hips. Lean forward. Rest your forearms on your thighs. Then take a slow breath in, and as you breathe out, imagine your lower abdomen becoming soft. Don't suck your stomach in. Don't clench your buttocks. Don't hold your breath. And don't try to force everything out in one enormous push. Instead, allow a gentle pressure to build as you exhale, then relax, breathe again, repeat. You're giving your body an opportunity to coordinate the movement instead of turning the bathroom into a battle. And there's something else I want you to understand. Don't ignore the urge repeatedly. Your body has a communication system for this. When stool enters the rectum, stretch receptors send signals to your nervous system. You experience that as the urge to have a bowel movement. If you repeatedly ignore that signal, you're essentially teaching your body that the signal doesn't need an immediate response. That doesn't mean ignoring one urge will permanently damage your bowel. Life happens. You're driving. You're at work. You're in a meeting. But if postponing bowel movements becomes your normal routine, it can make establishing a predictable bowel habit more difficult. So if your body gives you a reasonable opportunity to go, take it. And remember the morning window we talked about earlier. Wake up, hydrate, move, eat if that's part of your normal routine. Then give yourself a little time. Don't rush out the door immediately after breakfast if you can reasonably avoid it. For many people, this simple routine is more useful than constantly searching for a stronger laxative. Now, there's another situation I want to talk about because it can be incredibly frustrating. You finally have a bowel movement, but afterward, you still don't feel empty. You wipe, you stand up, and 10 minutes later, you're thinking, I still feel like there's something there. That sensation is called incomplete evacuation, and it can happen for several reasons. Sometimes the stool is hard. Sometimes the rectum hasn't completely emptied. Sometimes the bowel movement is fragmented into small pieces. Sometimes the pelvic floor isn't coordinating properly. And sometimes constipation is being caused or worsened by something you're taking every day. This is especially important after 50 because as people get older, medications become a much more common contributor to constipation. Certain pain medications, particularly opioid painkillers, can slow the movement of the digestive tract. Some medications used for blood pressure can contribute. Some antacids containing certain minerals can contribute. Iron supplements can contribute. Certain antidepressants can contribute. And there are other medications as well. I'm not telling you to stop any medication. Please don't do that. The point is to look at the entire picture. If your constipation started shortly after beginning a new medication or supplement, that's worth discussing with your doctor or pharmacist. Sometimes the solution isn't adding another product to your routine. Sometimes the solution is finding out whether something you're already taking is contributing to the problem. And this brings us to one of the biggest mistakes people make when they want immediate relief. They keep adding things, fiber powder, then another fiber powder, then a stool softener, then a herbal tea, then a stimulant laxative, then another supplement they saw online, and suddenly their digestive system is being hit from 5 different directions. That's not necessarily a better strategy. It's often just harder to understand what's actually working. Instead, think in layers. First, identify what's happening. Is your stool hard? Are you going in frequently? Are you straining? Do you feel incomplete? Are you bloated? Do you have the urge but nothing comes out? Those details matter because constipation isn't one single problem. Different patterns can have different causes. For example, if your stool is hard and dry, hydration, dietary changes, and an appropriate stool softening strategy may be relevant. If your stool is already soft but you still can't evacuate it, simply adding more fiber may not solve the underlying problem. That's when pelvic floor coordination becomes much more important. And if you're suddenly constipated when you've never had this problem before, especially after 50, you shouldn't automatically assume it's just aging. A new change in bowel habits deserves attention. Now let's talk about something that can help you right when you're feeling sluggish. Warmth and relaxation. For some people, having a warm drink in the morning can become part of a regular bowel routine. Coffee can stimulate the urge in some people too, partly because of its effects on the digestive tract and partly because it's often consumed in the morning when the gastrocolic reflex is already active, but coffee isn't required. You don't need caffeine to have a bowel movement. If you don't drink coffee, don't start drinking it just because somebody told you it's a constipation cure. Water, a warm, non-caffeinated drink. Breakfast, movement, and time can create a useful morning routine without relying on caffeine. And now I want to show you another technique that many people find surprisingly helpful. Gentle abdominal massage. This is not a deep tissue massage. You're not trying to press into your organs. You're not trying to force stool through your colon. The goal is simply gentle, comfortable movement of the abdominal wall. Place your hand on the lower right side of your abdomen. That's where the large intestine begins its upward journey. Using gentle pressure, move your hand upward toward the right side of your rib cage. Then slowly move across the upper abdomen toward the left. Then move downward along the left side toward the lower abdomen. You're essentially tracing the general path of the large intestine. Do this slowly, breathe normally, let your abdomen relax, and most importantly, stop if it hurts. You don't need to press hard. You don't need to do it for 20 minutes. Even a short period can become part of a calming bathroom routine. And here's why I like combining this with breathing. Your digestive system and nervous system constantly communicate. When you're stressed, rushed, anxious, or physically tense, your digestive patterns can change. Think about what happens when you're trying to have a bowel movement while you're running late. You're looking at the clock. You're tightening your muscles. You're thinking, come on, come on, come on. Your body doesn't necessarily respond well to that pressure. So instead, slow down, breathe, relax your abdomen, give your body a few minutes. This isn't about being passive. It's about allowing the normal physiology of defecation to work. Now, here's where I want you to be careful. If you have severe or worsening abdominal pain, vomiting, significant abdominal swelling, inability to pass gas, blood in your stool, black or tarry stool, unexplained weight loss, fever, or a major unexplained change in your bowel habits, don't keep trying home remedies and hoping they'll fix the problem. Get medical attention, because constipation is usually uncomfortable and manageable, but occasionally it can be a sign of something that needs evaluation. And after 50 persistent or new bowel changes shouldn't simply be written off as getting older. That's an important distinction. We're talking about ordinary constipation here. We're not talking about ignoring warning signs. Now, let's come back to the person who wants to know one thing. What can I do today? Here's the sequence. I want you to remember, don't start by forcing. Start by creating the right conditions. Drink an appropriate amount of fluid. Get up and move. If you've just eaten, give your digestive system some time to respond. When you feel the urge, go rather than repeatedly postponing it. Use a footstool. If that position is comfortable, lean forward, relax your abdomen, breathe out rather than holding your breath. Don't sit there endlessly. And if you're comfortable with it, try gentle abdominal massage. Then step away. Give your body another opportunity later rather than turning the bathroom into a 30-minute struggle. But there's one more piece of this puzzle that can make a huge difference, particularly if you're over 50. And is something people rarely connect with: constipation, your daily movement, and muscle strength. Because your colon doesn't exist in isolation, your entire body is changing. As you age, you may lose muscle. You may spend more time sitting. You may walk less. Your abdominal and pelvic muscles may become weaker or less coordinated, and your routine may become much less physically demanding than it was 20 or 30 years ago. That doesn't mean constipation is inevitable. It means your strategy may need to change. You don't necessarily need a gym. You don't need to run. You don't need an extreme workout, but you do need regular movement. A short walk, standing up every hour, walking after meals, doing safe resistance exercises appropriate for your ability. All of these can help you maintain a body that functions better overall. And that brings us to the next question. What if you're doing all of this and you're still constipated? What if you drink plenty of water? What if you eat fruits and vegetables? What if you walk every day? What if you use the bathroom correctly and you're still going 3 days without a bowel movement? Or you're going every day but constantly feel blocked? That's when we need to look deeper, because sometimes constipation isn't a simple lifestyle problem. It can be related to medications. It can be related to slow movement through the colon. It can be related to pelvic floor dysfunction. It can be related to conditions such as hypothyroidism or diabetes. And occasionally, persistent changes need evaluation to rule out a structural problem. So don't let someone tell you that every constipation problem can be solved by just eat more fiber. That's not how the human digestive system works. And this is where I want you to remember something from the beginning of this video. The goal isn't simply to make yourself poop. The goal is to restore a bowel pattern that is comfortable, predictable, and easy to pass. Because if you need increasingly aggressive remedies every few days just to have a bowel movement, that's not a solution. That's a signal that we need to understand what's driving the problem. And in the next part, we're going to get into some of the most common home strategies people use for constipation. What may actually help, what can backfire, and how to think about laxatives without falling into the trap of taking more and more. We'll also talk about one of the most overlooked reasons constipation becomes stubborn after 50. And once you understand that factor, you'll see why someone can eat a perfectly reasonable diet and still struggle every single morning. So stay with me, because that's where this stops being about how do I poop today and becomes a much more important question. Why has my bowel stopped working the way it used to? Now let's get into the part that most people misunderstand about constipation. After 50, you can eat a reasonably healthy diet, drink water, take walks, and still feel like your bowel simply isn't cooperating. And when that happens, the temptation is to keep adding more fiber, more supplements, more prune juice, and another laxative, another natural constipation remedy. But sometimes the answer isn't more. Sometimes the answer is figuring out what type of constipation you're actually dealing with. Because imagine two people. The first person has hard, dry stool that sits in the colon and becomes difficult to pass. The second person has stool that isn't particularly hard, but every time they sit down, they feel blocked, they strain, very little comes out, and afterward, they still feel like something is left. Those two people may both say, I'm constipated, but their problems aren't necessarily identical, and treating them exactly the same way can be frustrating. This is especially important if you're over 50, because constipation can become a combination of several small factors rather than one obvious cause. Maybe you're moving less, maybe your diet changed, maybe you started a medication, maybe your bathroom routine became irregular, maybe you have a tendency to ignore the urge, maybe your pelvic floor isn't relaxing properly, or maybe your colon simply moves stool more slowly than it used to. And here's where I want to introduce something that can completely change the way you think about your bathroom routine. Your bowel loves consistency, not perfection. Consistency. Your digestive system is influenced by your daily schedule, your meals, your activity, your sleep, your hydration, and your nervous system. If every day looks completely different, your bowel doesn't get the same predictable signals. One day you wake up at 6. The next day you sleep until 9. One morning you eat breakfast. The next morning you skip it. One day you drink plenty of water. The next day you barely drink anything. One day you walk after dinner. The next day you sit for 6 hours. And then you're surprised when your bowel habits are unpredictable. So if you want to make constipation easier to manage, one of the most powerful things you can do is create a repeatable routine. Wake up around the same time when possible. Drink fluids regularly throughout the day, eat meals at reasonably consistent times, move your body every day, and give yourself an opportunity to use the bathroom at a predictable time, particularly after a meal when the gastrocolic reflex may be active. You're not forcing your colon to perform on command. You're giving it repeated opportunities to establish a rhythm. And that distinction matters. Now, let's talk about laxatives, because if you're constipated, there's a good chance you've wondered about them. Maybe you've seen a commercial, maybe a friend recommended one, maybe you've used one before and thought, that worked, so I'll just take it again. But laxatives aren't all the same. There are different categories that work in different ways. Some increase stool bulk, some soften stool, some draw water into the bowel, some stimulate intestinal contractions, and some are combinations. That's why I don't want you thinking of a laxative as one single thing. The appropriate option depends on your symptoms, your medical history, your medications, and how long the constipation has been going on. For occasional constipation, certain over-the-counter options can be appropriate for many adults when used according to the label. But if you're relying on laxatives repeatedly, especially if you find yourself needing them every few days just to have a bowel movement, that's a reason to step back and ask why. Because relief is not the same thing as solving the underlying problem. And please be particularly careful with products marketed as powerful detoxes, colon cleanses, or miracle herbal flushes. Your colon does not need a commercial detox. And some of these products can cause significant diarrhea, dehydration, cramping, or electrolyte disturbances. The goal is not to empty your entire digestive tract. The goal is to have a normal, comfortable bowel movement. That's a very different goal. Now, let's talk about one of the simplest food-based approaches, again, prunes. You may have heard people say, eat prunes, and there's actually a reasonable physiological explanation for why they can help. Prunes provide fiber and contain sorbitol, which can draw water into the bowel. For some people, incorporating a modest serving into the diet can support regularity. But here's the mistake. Someone hears that prunes help constipation and thinks if a few help, a whole bowl must work better. Not necessarily. Too much can produce bloating, gas, abdominal discomfort, and diarrhea. So start modestly, give your digestive system time, and pay attention to how your body responds. The same principle applies to fiber. You don't have to transform your diet overnight. If your current diet is low in fiber, gradually increase foods such as vegetables, fruits, beans, lentils, oats, and other fiber-rich whole foods. And if you use a fiber supplement, introduce it gradually and follow the product instructions. But remember something important. Fiber is not a universal answer to every constipation problem. If your stool is already soft and you're still struggling to evacuate, piling on more fiber may simply increase bulk without fixing the coordination problem. That's when it's worth discussing your symptoms with a healthcare professional. And now let's talk about hydration. You probably heard drink 8 glasses of water, but hydration isn't a magic number that applies identically to every person. Your needs depend on your body, your activity, your environment, your diet, and medical conditions. The practical point is simple. Don't routinely allow yourself to become dehydrated. If you're thirsty, your urine is consistently very dark, or you're going through most of the day drinking almost nothing, that's worth addressing. But if you've been told to restrict fluids because of heart, kidney, or another medical condition, don't suddenly increase your fluid intake without talking with your clinician. Again, we're not chasing an extreme, we're looking for balance. And here's another habit that deserves far more attention than it gets. Get out of the chair. If you're watching television, stand up during commercial breaks. If you've been reading for an hour, walk around the room. If you're working at a desk, take regular movement breaks. After meals, if you're able, take a gentle walk. You don't have to think of this as exercise. Think of it as giving your body frequent reminders that it's supposed to move. Your digestive system is part of that moving body. Now, there's something else that can quietly change your bowel habits after 50 loss of routine, retirement, travel, changes in work schedules, more time at home, less walking, different meal times, changes in sleep. These things sound harmless, but your bowel responds to routines. And sometimes people don't realize that their constipation began shortly after their daily structure changed. So if you suddenly became less active after retirement, for example, Don't just blame your age. Look at what changed. That's often a much more useful question. Now let's return to the problem of incomplete evacuation. If you're going every day but constantly feel that your bowel never completely empties, I want you to pay attention to exactly what happens. Do you feel the urge but can't start? Does stool begin coming out and then stop? Do you have to strain repeatedly? Do you feel pressure in the rectum? Do you need to change positions? Do you sometimes have to return to the bathroom several times? These details can help your clinician understand what's going on. And if this has been happening persistently, don't assume you simply need a stronger laxative. Sometimes the pelvic floor muscles need evaluation. In certain cases, specialized pelvic floor physical therapy and a treatment called biofeedback can help people who have difficulty coordinating those muscles during bowel movements. That's important because the treatment for a coordination problem isn't necessarily more fiber. It's learning how to coordinate the muscles correctly. And now we're approaching a subject that many people over 50 don't want to talk about. Medications. Constipation can be an unintended side effect of medications you take for completely unrelated reasons. Pain medicines, iron, some antacids, some antidepressants, certain blood pressure medicines, some neurological medications, and others. The exact risk depends on the medication and the individual. So if constipation appeared after you started a new prescription, changed the dose, or added a supplement, write down the timing. Then ask your doctor or pharmacist, could this be contributing to my constipation? Don't stop the medication yourself. Sometimes there's an alternative medication. Sometimes the dose can be adjusted. Sometimes the constipation can simply be managed alongside the medication, but you need to know whether the medication is part of the picture. And here's another overlooked factor: stress. Your digestive tract and your nervous system are constantly communicating. That's why your stomach can feel completely different when you're anxious. That's why some people get diarrhea before an important event. And that's why others become constipated during periods of chronic stress. When your nervous system is constantly in a heightened state, your normal digestive patterns can change. So if you're rushing through meals, eating while staring at your phone, constantly worrying, sleeping poorly, and spending the entire day tense, don't be surprised if your digestive system isn't behaving perfectly. This doesn't mean constipation is all in your head. It's not. It means your brain and digestive system are connected. And sometimes giving your nervous system a chance to settle can be part of a broader constipation strategy. Try eating more slowly. Take several slow breaths before sitting on the toilet. Don't bring stressful work into the bathroom. Give yourself a few uninterrupted minutes. Your bowel isn't a machine you can command. It's part of a nervous system controlled biological process. Now, let's put all of this together. Imagine tomorrow morning. You wake up, instead of immediately rushing into the day, you drink some fluid appropriate for you, you move around for a few minutes, you have breakfast. If that's part of your normal routine, then you notice an urge. Instead of ignoring it, you go to the bathroom, you place your feet on a stable stool, your knees come slightly above your hips, you lean forward, you relax your belly, you breathe. You don't hold your breath. You don't strain violently. You give your body several minutes. If nothing happens, you get up. You walk around, and you try again later when the urge returns. That's a completely different strategy from sitting there for 30 minutes thinking, why can't I poop? And that's the point. Stop fighting your bowel. Start working with it. But there is one more thing I need to tell you, because there are situations where constipation should not be treated as a simple home remedy problem. And knowing the difference could be much more important than knowing which food to eat. If your constipation is new and persistent after 50, if your bowel habits have changed significantly without an obvious reason, if you see blood in the stool, if your stool becomes black or tar-like, if you lose weight without trying, if you develop persistent or severe abdominal pain, if your abdomen becomes significantly swollen, if you're vomiting, if you can't pass gas, If you develop fever or if your symptoms are rapidly worsening, that's not the moment to keep experimenting with home remedies. You need medical evaluation. And there's another situation people often overlook. If you're having frequent episodes where you feel blocked, especially with significant pain or vomiting, don't keep taking laxatives repeatedly without professional advice. In some situations, constipation can become severe enough that the stool becomes impacted, and the treatment may be very different from simply eating more fiber. That's why symptoms matter. Now, if none of those warning signs apply and you're dealing with ordinary occasional constipation, let's make your strategy extremely simple. Don't try 12 things at once. Pick a few fundamentals: hydration, gradual fiber from whole foods, daily movement, a consistent bathroom routine, proper toilet positioning, relaxed breathing instead of aggressive straining, and when appropriate, a reasonable food-based option such as prunes. Then watch what happens. If it improves, keep the habits. If it doesn't improve, don't simply keep adding more products. That's when it's time to investigate the cause, because persistent constipation isn't something you should just accept as a normal part of getting older. And in the final part, I'm going to give you a simple morning constipation routine that combines the most useful ideas we've covered into one sequence you can remember. I'll also explain the mistake that can turn a well-intentioned constipation routine into more bloating and more discomfort, and I'll show you how to know when it's time to stop treating constipation yourself and talk to a healthcare professional, because the goal isn't to have one dramatic bowel movement. The goal is to get your digestive system back into a pattern where going to the bathroom becomes something you barely think about. And for many people, that's the real definition of relief. And now we come to the part I really want you to remember, because if you've been constipated for days, the temptation is to keep adding more and more remedies until something finally works. But your bowel does not necessarily need more force. Sometimes it needs the right sequence. So if you're sitting there thinking, I need to go, but nothing is happening, don't immediately start straining. Start by changing the conditions around the bowel movement. First, give your body some fluid. A glass of water can be a simple starting point, especially if you haven't been drinking enough. Then get yourself moving. You don't need a workout. Walk around your home for several minutes. Gently move your body and give your digestive system a chance to respond. Then, when you feel an urge, don't ignore it. This is where the next step becomes surprisingly important. Sit on the toilet and raise your feet on a small, stable footstool so your knees sit slightly higher than your hips. Lean forward comfortably. Rest your forearms on your thighs. Let your stomach relax. And instead of holding your breath and pushing as hard as possible, breathe slowly and allow your pelvic muscles to relax. That last part is easy to underestimate. A bowel movement isn't simply about having enough stool inside you. Your abdominal muscles, pelvic floor, rectum, nerves, and colon have to coordinate. If you're tense, rushing, holding your breath, or repeatedly forcing the movement, you can make the process harder rather than easier. So think about this differently. You're not trying to overpower your bowel. You're trying to give it the conditions it needs to do its job. And if you've been watching this because you want something you can try immediately, here's the simple sequence I want you to remember. Water, gentle movement, a calm bathroom position, relaxed breathing, and no prolonged straining. You can also try the gentle abdominal massage we discussed earlier. Place your hand on the lower right side of your abdomen and slowly move upward towards your ribs. Then move across the upper abdomen and gradually down the left side. Keep the pressure light and comfortable. Don't dig into your abdomen, and don't continue if it causes pain. The goal isn't to force stool through your intestines. The goal is gentle stimulation and relaxation. And here's something especially important if you're over 50. Don't assume that constipation is simply something you have to accept because you're getting older. Bowel habits can change with age, but persistent or newly developing constipation deserves attention. Sometimes the cause is relatively simple, such as changes in diet, hydration, physical activity, daily routine. or medications. But sometimes persistent constipation can be related to an underlying medical problem that needs evaluation. And this is where I want you to avoid one of the biggest mistakes people make. They keep treating the symptom for months without asking why the symptom changed in the first place. Maybe you used to have a bowel movement every morning and suddenly you're struggling several times a week. Maybe you're going regularly, but they constantly feel like something is still left behind. Maybe your stool has become consistently harder. Maybe you have started straining much more than you used to. Those changes are worth discussing with a healthcare professional, particularly if they're persistent. And please don't wait for a home remedy to solve everything if you have warning signs. If you have blood in your stool, black or tarry stool, unexplained weight loss, persistent or severe abdominal pain, repeated vomiting, fever, significant abdominal swelling, inability to pass gas along with worsening pain or distension, or a major unexplained change in your bowel habits, seek medical evaluation rather than repeatedly trying home remedies. Because there's an important difference between ordinary occasional constipation and a bowel problem that needs investigation. And I want to close by giving you one final idea that may completely change the way you approach this. Your bowel doesn't work in isolation. Your sleep, stress, movement, hydration, food, medications, routine, and even the way you sit on the toilet can all influence how easily you go. So instead of asking yourself, what is the strongest constipation remedy I can take? Start asking, what is making it difficult for my body to complete this process? That question leads you toward a much better solution. If you're constantly sitting all day, start moving more. If you're barely drinking fluids, improve your hydration. If you're eating very little fiber, increase fiber gradually rather than suddenly overwhelming your digestive system. If you've been ignoring the urge to go every morning, start giving yourself enough time. If you're straining every time you sit down, stop treating the bathroom like a test of strength. And if you've recently started a medication and your bowel habits changed afterward, talk with your healthcare professional before stopping anything on your own. Because sometimes the answer isn't another supplement or another complicated trick. Sometimes the answer is identifying the thing that quietly changed. And remember the sequence we started with. Don't panic. Don't force. Don't sit there straining for 20 minutes, hoping something will suddenly happen. Give your body a chance. Hydrate, move, relax, use a comfortable position, respond to the urge. And if you use abdominal massage, keep it gentle. Those steps may sound almost too simple, but constipation often becomes worse when people respond with more force instead of better coordination. And if you've been struggling with this for a long time, don't be embarrassed to talk about it. Constipation is extremely common, and feeling like you can't completely empty your bowels can affect your comfort, sleep, appetite, confidence, and quality of life. It's a real health concern, not something you should simply suffer through in your silence. So here's what I want you to do after this video. Don't try 10 different remedies at once. Choose the simple routine we've discussed and pay attention to how your body responds. And if your constipation keeps returning, becomes persistent, or represents a clear change from your normal bowel habits, get the cause evaluated rather than endlessly covering up the symptom. Your goal isn't simply to go. Your goal is to have a bowel system that works comfortably, predictably, and without excessive straining. And if this video helped you understand why constipation can happen and what you can safely try at home, share it with someone who keeps saying, I feel like I need to go, but nothing happens. They may be dealing with the exact same problem and simply haven't talked about it. And before you leave, tell me in the comments, how long have you been dealing with constipation? Days, weeks, or months? Your answer could help someone else realize they're not alone. Subscribe for more evidence-based health information for adults over 50. And remember, when it comes to your digestion, don't just ask how to force your body to go. Learn how to help your body do what it was designed to do